Welcome to the Scotland's Talk-In special. I'm Colin MacKay and I'm at St Bryce Kirk in Kirkcaldy. And joining me are more than 400 young people from 17 schools and colleges across Fife. We are here to debate Scotland's future, with just 7 months to go before the referendum. Answering their questions is a top panel of politicians who'll get a minute each to set out their case. From Yes Scotland, we have the SNP's Fiona Hislop and Patrick Harvie of the Greens. From Better Together, we have Ruth Davidson of the Conservatives and Labour's Anas Sarwar. And first, for a minute, no more than that, we're going to hear from Anas Sarwar of Scottish Labour.
Good morning, folks. My name is Anas Sarwar, as Colin's already said, and I'm a Member of Parliament for Glasgow Central constituency, Deputy Leader of the Scottish Labour Party, and proud to be our party's referendum coordinator. I will be voting no, and I'm proud to be playing a role in keeping Scotland part of the United Kingdom. But I'm voting no because I believe in an idea bigger than independence, and that's the pooling and sharing of resources across the UK for the benefit of everyone in the UK, where a pensioner in Fife is supported by a taxpayer in Newcastle, where a disabled person in Cardiff is supported by a worker in Aberdeen. And not just tax raised from businesses in Scotland, but tax raised from big business right across the UK, redistributed to where it is needed most. Remember the bailout of RBS, paid for by taxpayers from across the UK, no questions asked, no IOUs demanded. And now when we see the floods in parts of England, taxpayers across the UK supporting those communities, no questions asked, no IOUs demanded. Just a recognition that in times of hardship, we support each other and stand shoulder to shoulder. And that's why we have the best of both worlds of Scotland as part of the UK.
Thanks, Anas. Next we have Patrick Harvie on the Yes side.
Over the next few months, you're going to hear a lot of people trying to tell you that independence would be either utopia or disaster. I don't think either is true. I think the truth is somewhere in between. Independence opens up possibilities for Scotland, which I don't think we can have at the moment. The possibility of a more democratic society, a more accountable society where big business is held accountable for the decisions that it makes in all of our lives. Because right now, the UK does not redistribute wealth, as Anas suggests, where people who depend on public services here in Fife and around Scotland are actually being done over by tax avoiders in the City of London, where we have a very unequal, unsustainable society, an economy that needs radical change. I don't think that change is going to be easily delivered within the UK. I think voting yes for independence opens up the possibility of something much better.
Thanks, Patrick. You even kept to time. That's fantastic. Next up, from the Better Together campaign, we have Ruth Davidson.
Hello, my name is Ruth Davidson. I'm the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, and I want to keep the UK together, which is why I'll be voting no. Like Anas, I believe that at the moment we have the best of both worlds in that we can make decisions about things like health and education and police here in Scotland, but we're also part of something bigger where we can share risks and rewards. I think we're safer for being part of the UK armed forces. I think we have the most professional armed forces in the world. I think we have more influence in the world for sitting at the top table in terms of the EU, NATO, the UN, the G7, the G8. And I think that we're more prosperous as a country because we've got a bigger market. In Scotland, we export more to the rest of the UK than we do to the rest of the world. So you add China to India to America to Japan to France to Germany and everywhere else, put all of that together, and we sell more from Scotland to England, Northern Ireland and Wales than all of that. Also for the simple fact that while I'm Scottish, I'm British too. I feel like I get to have both, and I don't want one of them taken away from me. So that's why I'll be voting no.
Thanks, Ruth Davidson. And our last speaker of the morning is Fiona Hislop on the Yes campaign side.
Hi, my name is Fiona Hislop. I'm the SNP MSP for Linlithgow and Government Cabinet Secretary. I'm voting yes because I think the people of Scotland are capable and able of making not just some of the decisions about our future, but all of the decisions about our future. I think we can be independent because Scotland has economic strengths for the future. I think we should be independent because we can shape the type of society that we want. And I think we must be independent because we face a choice of two futures, one with a Scottish Government with independence or one with the Westminster Government. I think there are certainties and uncertainties on both sides, but I feel confident that we can shape our own future if we have all the powers with independence.
Thanks very much. Now, we're not going to hang around. We're going to go straight to the questions because we want to get as many as we possibly can in. And our first question comes from Callum Edmondson from Glenrothes High School. Callum, what's your question for the panel?
Is it feasible for an independent Scotland to continue to use the pound?
Fiona Hislop, can we still use the pound if we're independent?
Yes, we can. Obviously, it's a shared asset, as it is just now the Bank of England. It's in our interest to do that. The Fiscal Commission that was set up reported and set out why quite clearly we could and we should. But more importantly, it's also in the rest of the UK's interests. Our balance of payments are strong enough that would actually support them. And interestingly, Jim Mirrlees, who is one of the Nobel laureates who put forward the position in the Fiscal Commission, argues that we can and we should. Scotland has a strong financial strength, and it would be in everybody's interest for us to use sterling in terms of market exchange. But I think that's one of the arguments that I think we're starting to see the logic of it, and people are asking the UK to bring certainty to the table from their position, that they also think that would be a good idea with a yes vote.
And ask Sarwar.
Fiona said in her opening statement that all decisions will be made here in Scotland. Actually, you won't make all the decisions based on their proposals for a currency union. What they're essentially saying is the Westminster will still have big decisions to make on our interest rates, our spending limits, our borrowing limits, our budgets, but actually we won't have any influence on those decisions ourselves. So basically the choice on the 18th of September is big decisions will still be made at Westminster that affect our everyday lives here. The big choice is, do we want to be in the room when those decisions are made? I don't think it makes sense to say, let's keep that currency union, but let's go away from that political union at the same time. I'd rather we had a strong Scottish voice at Westminster making the case for Scotland rather than away from Scotland. Patrick Harvey, you're on the Yes campaign. Are you convinced that we should keep the pound in an independent Scotland?
Well, the first question was, is it feasible? And the answer to that is yes, it is feasible. Whether it's the best option in the long run, I'm less convinced. It may well be that if there's a yes vote, both governments will sit down and reach an agreement that continued shared use of the pound across these two independent countries is the most practical short-term solution. It would involve the two governments reaching agreements. Not one government imposing on the other, but the two governments reaching agreements about things like borrowing levels, perhaps overall taxation levels. So that it's not, as Anna suggests, that decisions would be made without Scotland in the room. Decisions would be made between the two governments. I think that gives us less economic flexibility than I think we ought to have. Certainly more than we have now.
So you're not even convinced we should keep the pound?
I think over time after independence, it's likely that the two economies would start to diverge. And as the economies diverge, I think the case would become stronger for Scotland having its own independent currency. And I think that would give us the flexibility to make big macroeconomic choices on our own. And that's what we need to do if we want to run a different kind of economy.
OK, Ruth Davidson, Callum asks if it's feasible. It is feasible, isn't it?
It is, but the proposition isn't just about whether Scotland would use the pound. It would be whether it would be in a currency union with what would then be a foreign country. So, for example, someplace like Ecuador uses the US dollar, but it doesn't have an agreement with the US, it doesn't with America, about its interest rates or its debt levels or anything like that. It just uses someone else's currency. What the SNP are proposing is that there would be some sort of deal done by a newly independent Scotland and the rest of the UK. Now, Alex Salmond says he knows that's going to happen. He can't actually make that decision for the rest of the UK, and this decision matters because it's not just about what you spend in your pocket, but it works on other things as well. So, for example, interest rate levels, the way in which debts are repaid internationally. And as that matters to real people, for example, if interest rates go up by even just 1%, that's an extra £1,000 on the average mortgage. So that sort of stuff really matters.
It is feasible.
Well, it could happen, but they can't guarantee that it will.
The UK government said that it's not going to happen. They've said it might not happen. It's maybe not desirable, but they've not said it's not going to happen, have they?
No, and I think that there's a lot more to be explored on this, Colin, but I don't think that you can have a country saying, right, we don't want to be part of the country we've been part of anymore, but you have to do this for us. And I don't think that it's right that Alex Salmond says that they will, and I don't think it's telling the people of Scotland what they need to know. There's huge doubt about this area, and a lot is still to be worked out.
Callum, what do you think?
I'm not too sure, to be honest, but I think
that's why we're here.
Neither is Alex Salmond, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Does anybody else want to come in? Is anybody else concerned, or does anybody else think we shouldn't have the pound? You know, are you concerned about the pound? Hands up if you want to, if you have a concern about the pound. I mean, how many of you have a pound in your pocket just now? Yeah, all of you, yeah, because you get your pocket money at the weekend or whatever, you've been working, whatever. So, I mean, has anybody got a comment to make on the pound? Is anybody concerned about this? Because this has been one of the biggest issues in the campaign so far. So I can't believe that you're not worried about it. I can't believe you're not worried about where your next pound's coming from. So, come on, hands up. Who's got a problem? Right, lady there.
Hi, I'm just a little bit concerned that Ruth Davidson's sitting there saying that Alex Salmond or the Yes campaign is saying, you know, you must do this for us. But on the other hand, the Better Together campaign are saying, if you vote independent, you will take on a share of the nation's deficit. So surely, if we gain independence and we take on a share of the country's deficits, we are also therefore entitled to take on a share of the assets.
But is the pound an asset, Fiona Hislop? Is the pound an asset or is it the currency? Is there something to be shared out there?
The key point is the Bank of England. Remember, the Bank of England is actually independent of the UK government. It was one of the things that Gordon Brown, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, did, was to give the Bank of England its independence. So part of it is making sure that your currency union affects and implements what you need to do as a government, and that can perfectly happen with independence. It's happened with other countries like the Benelux. Look at Canada. Canada has a whole different type of arrangements. There are a whole 15 different federal states, different arrangements, and also as part of that same currency. So it can happen, and I think the lady is absolutely right. If you want Scotland to take on the £1 trillion of the debts that were built up by the UK government over the past period, that also means we're also entitled to the assets.
And that's how you've got to share both equally.
No, I agree. You should share the asset and the debt, but the key point is the Bank of England isn't an asset, it's an institution. It's like saying you'd have a divorce but still keep the share the bank account. That wouldn't happen. And the key point is, the reason why this matters to people in terms of the pound, this isn't some issue about the elite, as we heard this week. It's not some argument between politicians. The pound in your pocket matters to every single individual because it impacts on your mortgage, it impacts on your car loan, it impacts on your job, it impacts on businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and the business they do with other parts of the UK. And that's why the only way you can guarantee you keep the pound is if you stay part of the UK.
I'm going to come to the young guy here.
A lot of comments have been made about if we do get the pound. What if we don't get the pound? What happens then?
OK, what happens then if we don't? Patrick, you mentioned to come in. I'm going to go to Patrick on that.
Yeah, I mean, my view is that the Scottish Government should be at least laying the groundwork, figuring out what is going to be necessary to create an independent currency. That's my view. Whether or not a deal is reached about continued use of the pound, we should be ready to make a different decision as and when the time arises. But the UK Government, if there's a yes vote, things that better together are turning into kind of insurmountable problems. If there's a yes vote, the UK government and the Scottish government will turn them into solvable problems. And I think both governments would, in the short term, see a shared use. But it's not helpful to confuse a pound in your pocket with the pound, the currency. It's about, one is the money you've got, the other is how we structure the money we've got, how we govern the money we've got. And the Bank of England was nationalised after the Second World War by the whole of the UK, including by Scottish taxpayers, on behalf of all of us. So we would have a continued interest in how that institution is managed, how its assets and its liabilities are managed. And I think the question about fair shares does arise in relation to the Bank of England, even if the continued use of the pound as a currency isn't my preference for the long term.
Briefly, Ruth.
Yeah, it sounds terribly technical, but there is a difference between institutions and assets. And there isn't an inherent right for a breakaway state, which is what Scotland would be, to have a currency union with the state from which it has broken away. The only way that you can guarantee you'll keep the pound is to guarantee that you stay in the UK.
Fiona, you were itching to come in on that. What's your plan B? Because that's what everybody keeps asking you. Have you got one?
Countries can shadow currencies as they so choose. We think it's perfectly capable and able. And the point was the first question, is it feasible? Yes, it is. And the important point is in everybody's interest that we do that. And I think on day one, after a yes vote, it will be in the rest of the UK's interest because, as I said at the outset, Scotland has underlying economic strengths that makes us a good ally to have. I just want it on equal terms, not being dictated to by a government that, by and large, Scotland has not elected.
I think that's right. And, you know, if the pound didn't want us, I'll bet you £1 that the Krona would. Let's join that one.
But let's go to Nass, because there would be about 18 months or so to get a deal done. Surely there would be a deal if these circumstances arise after September.
Absolutely. We can and we will, and there's a difference between what happens in a negotiation. Now, the entire white paper is based on a premise that we will have a currency union. If that's not the case, that brings the entire white paper into disrepute, and that means that we do need a credible plan B, and I don't think the SNP can hold off until the 18th of September to give us facts.
The SNP can't tell England and Wales what's in their best interest, and that's what they're trying to do.
Does anybody else want to come in on this?
They can do it to us.
If you don't want to come in on this, somebody here, I'm going to get you with my mic because I can get that far. Excuse me a sec.
Isn't the Eurozone a prime example of what happens when you have integrated monetary policy but not integrated fiscal policy?
Yes.
Yeah, the thing with the Eurozone...
The better for the other side are nodding their heads, and they know that the yes side are desperate to speak.
Colin, the thing with the Eurozone is it already has a very divergent economy. The economic situation in Germany and Greece was already very, very divergent before the recent crisis began. Scotland and the rest of the UK are not like that. It's my view that over time, with independence, the two economies would diverge.
Those promoting an independent Scotland want there to be a divergent economy. That's the point of independence, is that you want to do things differently. And I think you're far more honest on this, Patrick, and I've always said that in any of these debates that we've done. I've said that your position has been far more honest on this.
But post the crash in the Eurozone, all the countries are looking at how they get closer politically, how they make more of a political union. What we're saying is we want to create a currency union but diverge in a political union. That doesn't make sense.
We've already got a currency union.
Exactly, and the way you keep that is you stay part of the United Kingdom.
The point the gentleman makes is absolutely right. It's the point that Jim Mirrlees made in the Fiscal Commission in terms of the report as to how and why we should have a currency union. The difference with the Eurozone, you can't tell France and Germany, they are independent countries. They're not, of course they're independent. The difference was the Greek productivity and the divergence between the economics of Greece and Spain compared to Germany meant that it became unstable. That isn't the case with Scotland, precisely because in terms of we have a maximised convergence in terms of our economic activity. That's precisely why it's not only feasible, it's doable, but also I think it provides us an opportunity for strength and economic growth.
We're going to move on now because we want to get more questions in. Our next question comes from Catherine Finlayson from Dunfermline High School. Where are you, Catherine?
Would an independent Scotland put up border controls between Scotland and England?
Would an independent Scotland put up border controls? Who could we come to but the External Affairs Secretary on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of border control, absolutely not. I mean, if you go anywhere in terms of Europe, you see that there aren't border controls. Even if you look between independent Ireland and the UK, there are no border controls, part of the common travel area. And that's what Scotland would be a part of as part of an independent Scotland. So I think that's a sensible idea. I think the idea, that, again, it's a part of the fears and smears of somehow that the only part of the whole of Europe that have border controls is between Scotland and England. I think that's nonsensical. I don't think it's actually needed in any shape or form in terms of policy. And some of the arguments are made about...
But hang on a sec to interrupt you, because it might not be your decision. You might not put up border controls, but what if the rest of the UK decided to put up border controls? What would you do then?
Scotland wouldn't want to do that, but I tell you, I think if you see any of the concerns in other parts of Gibraltar, for example, the UK government and the Spanish government causing difficulties with each other in terms of border controls. Nobody in economic interests from the UK would remotely think that it was either desirable or needed. But it is one of the issues that people are trying to sort of somehow scare people about. Of course it wouldn't happen. We're in a modern 21st century and the rest of Europe and indeed with Ireland, we don't have border controls between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Why on earth would we want to have that with Scotland and England? We wouldn't want to have it because we are, I think, a responsible government, and I think the idea that somehow the UK wants that, I think, is quite sad indeed.
The honest answer is it's not in Fiona's control. We at the moment have a Schengen opt-out. That's open to negotiation post the reapplication of membership to the EU. That could have an impact in terms of free movement of citizens. And the second point is, if we did have a divergent economic policy we've already talked about, if we had divergence in terms of our immigration policy, then it could be perfectly feasible for the rest of the UK to say, actually it makes sense to have border controls. Now, I don't want that. Who wants border controls? No one does. But the reality is, it's not in our gift. If we have divergent immigration policy, it could be up to the rest of the UK to decide, actually, we might need border controls.
But Ireland has a divergent immigration policy to the UK, and they don't have border controls.
We are one island. It makes it harder.
Ireland is one island.
Sorry, can I jump in?
Ireland is one island.
Sorry, can I jump in here? Because I thought it was preposterous to listen to Fiona Hislop say that there's no border controls across the EU. I don't know what happened the last time I went to France then. And then she went on to talk about having a border at Gibraltar between British Gibraltar and the rest of Spain. There are border controls against different places across the EU, and they exist when you have different policies. Now, if you look at the white paper that is sitting in front of Fiona there, the SNP, in a post-independent Scotland, want to have far greater immigration to Scotland. They want to have lower paid immigration in Scotland. They want to drop the cap for people coming in for low-paid workers. Now, that's fine, and they can go and push that policy if that's one that they want to pursue. But if the rest of the UK, which is sharing a border with a state that has a wholly different immigration policy, doesn't like the idea of free movement of travel and people, then it's not really in the SNP's gift to say whether that border would or would not be a controlled border like you see in Gibraltar, Spain, or an uncontrolled border like you see in Ireland, Northern Ireland. And the reason that there is a common travel area that works between Ireland and the rest of the UK is because they have made agreements on things like immigration and that they follow broadly similar immigration
none of which is rocket science.
Before we come in, let's pick up that point with the audience. Are people here concerned about immigration? Does immigration worry people in Scotland? Does immigration worry people of your age, teenagers? Are you bothered by immigration? Hands up if you're bothered about immigration, if you're worried about immigration. There's not a hand going up. Oh, there's one. Hands up if you're just not two. Hands up if you're not worried about immigration. Hands up if immigration is something that you think older people get worried about, but you guys are quite relaxed about it. Right, why are you relaxed about it? Why are you so relaxed about immigration?
Well, it's EU law, anyway, to let them to come in here. Plus, if we're going to start all these wars, may as well let all the refugees in.
And what about somebody who's concerned about immigration? You were concerned about immigration. I know I've come to you already, but I can reach you with my microphone, so I'm coming to you again. You're concerned about it. Why?
I just think it can create an instability in the economy if you have complete free movement of people. I think you need some restrictions on the amount of people coming in and out of a country. Now, that's not to say you should prevent anybody from coming in, but you do need restrictions in some areas.
Who else has got concerns, or who else is relaxed about immigration? Who's got a view on immigration? Does anybody else want to come in before I go to the panel? Somebody up there, right? Give me a sec. I'm just on my way to you. Right, what's your view on it?
I think that in an ever more multicultural world, immigration is a necessary thing, because if we get left behind with isolationist policies such as anti-immigration that the Conservative Party and UKIP are pushing at Westminster right now, then Scotland will just get left behind with the rest of the world, which will have a bad effect on the Scottish economy.
Well said.
Patrick Harvey. Patrick Harvey, is this an issue in the referendum? Is immigration or border controls a big issue in the referendum for you?
I think the issue of immigration is an issue for some people, and I really would want to echo the last speaker from the audience there. We need to be willing to talk about the benefits of immigration. We need to be able to challenge the xenophobic, anti-foreigner, anti-immigrant rhetoric that we do hear from south of the border sometimes, particularly from the right wing. But look, the reality is, yes, it's conceivable that either an independent Scotland or the rest of the UK would elect a government irrational enough that they would want to put up border controls. I think it's highly improbable, unless you're talking about Prime Minister Farage, which I think is still, way at the edges of possibility. I think it's highly improbable that either government would see border controls as a necessity or something that was in their interest. And look, every other country in Europe shares more borders. The UK has this history of being seeing itself as like an island fortress, which, I think we need to move beyond that in the 21st century and recognise that we need to empower people to migrate when that's in their interests. And we benefit hugely from that.
Ruth Davidson, do you think that your concerns about immigration, they're clearly not echoed among most of this audience?
Well, I think if you look at the results from the poll this morning, you see that only 10% of Scots want more immigration to Scotland. So I think it is echoed across the country. But I actually agree in many ways with the last gentleman speaker in that immigration can be of huge benefit to this country. But it can be of huge benefit to the country when you have some form of control and get to choose who you want to come in order to benefit it. So if you have a skills gap in healthcare, if you need more doctors, if you need more engineers, then they're the sort of people that you have. And that's why all countries have different rules about immigration. So you can have a points-based system, which I believe is what's in the white paper. That's what Australia has. You can have a green card system like the Americans have. You can have the system that the UK currently has. So there are different ways to model immigration. But anybody wants to have a prosperous country, then try and make immigration work for you and work for the country that's there.
The UK currently has treats asylum seekers in a brutal and inhumane manner. The very least we should be able to do is transform that system.
Well, let's go back to the audience.
I'd just like to pick up a point that Ruth Davidson said earlier. She said that Ireland and Northern Ireland have an agreement, and I feel that I don't think there would be a problem why Scotland and England, why we shouldn't have a agreement. If we can have an agreement about something as big as currency, why should there be border control?
They have an agreement because Ireland is shadowing to some extent the British immigration policy. That's why there's a free travel agreement there.
Ireland in recent weeks has made it quite clear that they have their own and distinct immigration system. I think the point is we want a type of Scotland where we do welcome those who want to come and live and work here. Many of them contribute and have contributed over many generations. But the current system and we've got a bill currently going through Westminster that is going to require doctors in Scotland, health service member devolved, and social landlords to try and police an immigration system, which already we've seen causes problems even for a former immigration minister that's had to resign in the last few days. I mean, there is a serious point here that universities in Scotland are really concerned that we're not getting the brightest and the best of European students coming to Scotland, or indeed particularly Indian students. Who have a big reduction in the number of Indian students coming to Scotland, precisely because in terms of promoting. I mean, I've probably done more to promote Chinese students coming to Scottish universities than yourself, Ruth.
So you can't say that immigration policy is damaging the number of foreign students when you're doubling the number of foreign countries.
But I do not want Scotland to be a country that somehow says to people, you are not welcome here if you've got something that you can offer to this country. And unfortunately, the rhetoric and the movement of the UK government in this direction, I think, is sending out all the wrong messages about the type of society that I think Scotland should be.
And Ash, you haven't come in on this yet.
Yeah, I just, whenever immigration comes up, it just makes me naturally think about my own family's history and story that replicates millions of people across the country. I mean, my grandfather came here in the mid-1940s trying to flee poverty and create opportunity for himself, travelled here, settled in the northeast of Scotland in Lossiemouth of all places, always thought he'd go home, but actually fell in love with Scotland and brought his own family here. And the reason why I bring that up is we're all passionate, loving Scots. I wouldn't describe myself as anything else, but the fundamental point is this, is you can have a system that works for Scotland if you have two governments that are willing to work together. We saw that with the Fresh Talent scheme of the last Scottish exec.
So what you're saying is that even if Scotland was independent, it could be made to work.
What I'm saying is, as part of the UK, we had a Fresh Talent scheme that recognised Scotland has specific needs. And by working in partnership with the UK government, we met those specific needs in terms of university places and employability afterwards.
And the UK government scrapped it.
Absolutely.
But the problem is
it's a fair point that the UK government did scrap it, because that was under the Labour government, then the Conservatives scrapped it.
Wouldn't it be great if we had a Scottish government that wanted to, and a UK government that wanted to work together rather than fight with each other all the time? I mean, one day we might hopefully see that. But the key point I'm making is this, is we can't say, look, these people have been so bad to us over the last 300 years, we need independence. But actually, see, after we get independence, every single thing they want, they'll agree to. We want to keep the pound, they'll agree to it. We want to keep no borders, they'll agree to it. Every single thing, they'll just do what's in our interest. That's not the case. England, Wales, Northern Ireland will naturally act what they believe in their own natural interest.
There could be border controls. Is that something that genuinely concerns you?
I wouldn't say it's my #1 priority in this debate, but we've got to be honest and say, if we have divergent immigration policy, it is not purely in our gift. It could be up to the rest of the UK to decide that we need border controls.
How likely would you say they were? I think they're pretty unlikely, given that we've got trains going across the border every couple of hours. There's 20-odd roads going across the border. Could we actually feasibly put border controls up there?
But Colin, we can't say never. How can we say that if we diverge so much from the rest of the UK on our immigration policy, that might then be the desire and the wish from the rest of the UK?
How much would you diverge?
The white paper sets out we want a controlled system, a sensible system, and we think like Ireland, just as the contributor said, just like Ireland, we can have agreements, and I think that's a sensible way forward. The difference is we help make a decision. We're part of the decision as opposed to the decision being made on our behalf.
Right, we're going to move on now. John Rodigan from Blaweary High School. Where are you, John? Right up the back, so somebody else is running away up there for me, because my legs are just not up to it these days. Come on, get your finger out and get up there. There we go. Right, John Rodigan.
In the event of a no vote, I've read that all the unionist parties are studying options for future Holyrood powers, but does there come a point when they have to say enough is enough? Is granting more powers just another step towards independence?
And Anas Sarwar, this is something that you sit on Labour's commission for. What are you at? What are you offering people?
Look, what I say is, look, we have always been the party of devolution. In 1997, when we had a landslide victory, we had a referendum within 2 months and a parliament within 2 years. And I've genuinely and passionately believe in devolution, and I don't think independence is anywhere near the same idea as devolution. Independence is not the end point of devolution. Actually, it's something that goes contradictory to devolution. And for all of us that believe in devolution, the only way of doing that is by keeping Scotland as part of
so
the UK.
So what extra powers are you offering John Rodigan, who asked the question?
Well, we've already made it clear that we will set out detailed priorities in the conference in March that will set out how we not only devolve power from Westminster to Holyrood, but crucially from Holyrood to local government as well. And more important than that, how you actually use those powers for a purpose. At the moment in Scotland, we've got centralisation happening in Holyrood, which I don't think benefits people across the country.
Would you go as far as the initial paper suggested and devolve the whole of income tax, for example?
Look, we're looking at the income tax proposals. We will publish in details what they are in March. But the important point is if a decision...
Is that still an option, a full income tax devolution?
Well, you'll get the decision in March, Colin. I'm sure we'll be having plenty of discussions and debates about it at that time. But the important point is if a decision goes against you and your family, Holyrood is just as far away from you as Westminster is. I don't think anyone stays awake at night thinking which politician should have which power and what building. What they care about is how we use those powers to make a difference to people's lives.
Fiona Hislop.
I said at the beginning this is a choice of two futures, and already you've heard that there is no certainty that if there's a no vote, suddenly there's going to be more powers given to Scotland. No certainty at all. And indeed, the real risk if Scotland was to vote no is to say that's it, you've had your chance, and the rest of the UK say no transfer of powers. Now, why am I sceptical? You might not be aware, but there was a recent bill passed within the last 2 years, and I argued for benefits to be transferred to Scotland under devolution, a whole variety of things. That bill was passed. Probably most people don't know about it. That was their chance. That was the chance. They've missed their chance. They had a chance to devolve more powers barely 2 years ago, and they didn't do it. So I think if we're realistic and we want to make sure that we grab the powers that we want to make decisions about our lives, whether it's welfare, whether it's benefits, whether it's about the economy and jobs, we've got to do it now. And that responsibility lies on each and every one of you. This is a once-in-a-lifetime, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to take those choices. And you either do it now or you'll be waiting for a very long time.
Ruth Davidson, hang on a second, you can come back in a minute. Ruth Davidson, John asks if there comes a point where enough is enough in terms of more powers. You drew a line in the sand, but you're now having a commission to look beyond that line.
Well, what I think is, when the Scottish Parliament was set up, it was set up in 1999. It was the first Parliament we'd had in Scotland for 300 years. And although there were some incredibly clever people who got together to say how it would work, they didn't get everything right first time. And I think it's probably unfair to expect them to get everything to work perfectly first time. There are ways in which you can make things work better. For example, when it was set up, we never expected that there would ever be a majority government just because of the voting system that we'd chosen to use. There has been, and that's put stresses and strains on some of the ways in which politics works on this country. And I think you can look at ways in which you can increase democracy that way, as well as you can have more responsibilities and more powers. And that's what our Commission is looking at. But I think it's slightly disingenuous of the Cabinet Secretary to say that there was a bill passed 2 years ago and it didn't have what she wanted in it. Well, there was a big commission right across Scotland that took in not just political parties but other groups too, that looked at what things we wanted to change to improve devolution. And that then became a bill, which then became an act, and it was passed. And it did transfer more powers, some of which are coming in as we speak. And as of 2015, you'll see a lot of your tax bills for your parents or if you're in jobs yourselves.
Yet again, just a couple of years on, so's the Labour Party, so the Lib Dems. Clearly you didn't get it right that time either.
Well, I think that devolution, it's an incredibly complex issue of how you run a country and how you deal with running 4 countries within the same nation state, and that's what we have in the United Kingdom.
But if you guys,
but you can improve and make things better, and I think it's.
Give me a second. If you guys come up with an option that you put to the electorate as the alternative to independence, is that it? Is that enough? Is that the new line in the sand from both of you?
Well, I think politics in this country has been dynamic for centuries. I don't think you ever say just because we have passed a bill that says, for example, women should get the vote at the age of 30. Well, that's what happens. You don't have women younger than that, and men had the vote at 21. Politics changes all the time, so I'm not going to tie the hands of future people.
And was George Robertson right then when he said that the devolution was the slippery slope, and eventually we'll get to independence? Because if you're saying that there isn't a line in the sand now, then that's presumably what happens.
No, first of all, Fiona's not right. More devolution is happening and will happen after the referendum. We've got more devolution happening all the way up until 2016.
But you're going to offer more again.
The key point is this, is that there's a difference between devolution and independence. This isn't a status quo versus independence. This is devolution versus independence. And I have made the open offer to all sides that whatever Scotland decides on the 18th of September, I will accept and work with anyone to make it work. Will the Nationalists do the same? If we reject independence, will they work with every other political party to end the obsession and make sure we get devolution to work and get Scotland working again?
Briefly, Fiona Hislop, then Patrick.
The Edinburgh Agreement that was signed between David Cameron and Alex Salmond was a very important document for a number of reasons, but not least Section 30 of it says that both governments would work in the best interest of the Scottish people after the result of that referendum, and that works 2 ways, and that's an important bedrock.
Patrick.
I think that's the one thing we should all agree on. It's going to be difficult after the referendum for the 2 sides to find common ground and work together. One side feeling triumphant, the other side feeling defeated. And I think we all need to try and achieve the goodwill that's required afterwards to govern well for Scotland. But this question about more powers, a little bit more devolution here, a little bit more there, it's often been used as an attempt to try and stifle the call for genuine home rule, for independence. I think that whether you're hostile to that or you see it as an attractive trajectory, I think something different will happen if Scotland votes no. This isn't just about what you think is the trajectory we should be on. It's about a moment of opportunity. We had a moment of opportunity to create devolution the first time round, and we missed our chance. And it was 20 years of economic and political wreckage that this country had to live in before we got another chance to create a Scottish Parliament and to have any devolution at all. I believe that if Scotland votes no this year, we're going to see a great many politicians, media pundits and a lot of the electorate south of the border turning around with a single voice and saying, can you not shut up about Scotland already? We're sick of it. We're talking about something else now. They'll be onto a European referendum or something similar. I think this is our moment of opportunity. I don't think it's going to come again. And if we wait another 20 years for it, what's going to be left of the welfare state by that point? Nothing. Nothing. This is our opportunity this year.
Let's go to the audience on this. Hands up if you think enough is enough already. If you think the Scottish Parliament has enough powers, hands up. There's not many of you, but there's a few. Hands up if you think the Scottish Parliament should have more powers, if you'd like to see more powers offered to the Scottish Parliament. Right, what powers would you like to see devolved?
I think they just need to have a little bit more control, I don't think they need to go all the way to independence, because some of the ideas that you were talking about there, talking about having independence, but the whole time you're still working with Westminster. So what's the point in independence, really, if the whole time you're independent, you're still going to be working joint with Westminster?
I think that's it.
You wanted to come in.
Well, concerning immigration, I believe Scotland strongly needs immigration. It's got a history of exporting people. So an immigration policy for Scotland would be a good thing economically.
Right, hands up if you didn't think Scotland needed extra powers, if you thought devolution was doing pretty well? There were some people over here, wasn't there? Hands up if you thought Scotland was doing okay as it was in terms of devolution. I know you guys had your hands up earlier. Right, what did you think? You thought, I wish you wouldn't have come near me with a microphone, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, just tell me that, though. What was your concern about the perhaps offering more powers?
Well, if we get too much, will we start getting greedy and want more, and then when we don't get it, will we have basically a paddy because we're not getting what we think we need, even though we already have powers already?
There you go. Would it be a never-endum? Is it? Are we ever going to be satisfied if it doesn't go as far as independence? Ruth Davidson.
I really can't answer that question, Colin. I don't know if you can or anybody else in the building can either. I think if we look at other examples around the world, you've seen something like Canada. Well, Quebec had 2 referenda about seceding seceding Quebec from the rest of Canada. And after the second one, actually, people decided, well, we want to put the constitutional question away. We've made our decision, and support for independence has gone way, way down. So I don't know if we'd be like the Canadian model.
And asked, why didn't Labour go for an extra option on the ballot paper to give people the choice to vote for more powers?
Look, I think it's right that the choice on the 18th is whether we want to stay part of the UK or not, and let people make that decision. And then once we've made that decision, we make that work. I think the important point, though, is, look, we don't want to have an endless constitutional argument in Scotland. What we want to talk about is
but couldn't you have solved that if you'd offered people a stronger option of more powers?
I'll give you a perfect example of what I mean by that, Colin. The big problem we have is we have health and education devolved in Scotland. We have health, and at the same time, we've got health inequalities widening in Scotland, not narrowing. We've got education devolved in Scotland. At the same time, access to education is not getting any better, it's getting worse in Scotland. The fact that if you're least likely to go to college or university if you come from a working class background if you live in Scotland than another part of the UK is a failure, not a success. And when the
UK government cuts its education funding, like charging tuition fees to students to go to university, that has a direct knock-on effect on the funding of Scottish services as well. We've got independent policy control, but not independence over the economic choices about how we fund them.
I was the government minister that abolished the back-end tuition fees that brought in free education for universities. That shows you it's a good example of where Scotland can do things differently and do them well. If you look at some of the education policies that are happening down south, they are not something that we would want to see. In England, they're going to have a situation where you don't even have to be a teacher to teach in some of our schools. We, and I pay tribute to the IS, who've helped organise today's event, we've got strong policies and distinctive policies.
We're already doing things differently. For example, you're doing them differently on the bedroom tax.
If we can do them well, if we can do them well over health, if we can do them well over education, as we are, we've got distinctive. Well, I would question.
You're not doing them well.
We've got free prescriptions here. We've got, in terms of our waiting times, much better in some of the issues down south. We've got a very successful health policies in Scotland, so much so that other people are looking from other countries to look at what we're doing. If we can do them well under health and education, what makes us think somehow we're incapable of doing them in other areas? We're more than capable of doing them in other areas.
But to get back to the point from over there, is this referendum a one-off deal?
I said it was once in a generation opportunity. I think it is.
What does that mean?
It means that I've got 2 children, one is 16 and one is 18. Do I think that they're ever going to get an opportunity like this again for the foreseeable future? No. Everybody's looking. The eyes of the world are on Scotland just now. People across the world are interested in what we're doing. We could be developing a modern democratic nation state in the north of Europe that could be a role model for lots of different things. We've got perfectly capable, able people. We have to take that chance. And I want to address the point, a very good point made at the front, about interdependence between governments. In the day and age of today, a lot of governments work together cooperatively in lots of different areas, and that's how it should be, in lots of different areas. But what we have to do is be able to have our own voice in the room to make those decisions, and currently that doesn't happen. Currently we have to sit behind the...
There's a fairly big prediction. You're saying that nobody in this audience here, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, they're not going to get to vote again on something like Scotland's future constitution. You reckon this is it?
In terms of the scale we've got, Patrick talked about 20 years between the rejection of the first referendum in 79. I was at your age, actually, when that happened in 79, and then we didn't get another chance for even the limited powers of devolution until 1997. And I'm too ambitious for Scotland. I want us to be able to contribute to the world, and I think the point about power and how we would act with it, I do believe Scotland would be responsible and how it acted. It's not just what Scotland can get for itself that's important, it's what we can contribute to the rest of the world.
You're talking about 50 years. Are you seriously saying there will be no other constitutional question? No, that's what you're talking about. No, that's what you're talking about. You're saying you don't think your kids will get another vote. You're thinking these guys won't get another vote.
Look, it's up to voters to decide which party they vote for. It's entirely possible Scotland could elect a government that's offering a referendum, but I don't think most political parties will offer one after there's been a no vote.
Ruth.
This is our moment of opportunity. Right. Let's take it.
Okay, Ruth.
Well, actually, I want people to have a think about this in a way that makes clear to them that it is different from an election. If you vote in the referendum, You know, it's not like voting in an election wherein if you don't like the government, you just vote again in 5 years' time and you vote them out of office. If you vote, you will be choosing to make a decision that could last forever.
Right, good.
And I think that you have to weigh every option very firmly about that, and you have to have the information. I think it's great that you've all come along today to try and get more information about this, because the decision that is made in September may never be reversed, and you have to take that on board.
Do you know, we're going to come to that again in a wee while, but I'm going to come to Dylan Niven now from St Andrews High School. Dylan, what's your question?
Given that the Queen is to remain head of state and that the preferred currency is the pound, why does the Yes campaign claim that the union with the UK is so bad when it wants to hold on to so much?
Patrick Harvey.
Well, that's the SNP's policy on the pound and on the monarchy as well. I want people in Scotland to be able to choose to elect a head of state instead, and I think it would be not only fairer and more democratic, but a damn sight cheaper as well. We pay through the nose for the royal family, an already very, very wealthy family who are being given huge amounts of public funds to run not a very efficient office of a head of state. Most countries do it a lot more sensibly. I think if there's a yes vote, then after that we can all begin to debate what a written constitution for Scotland would look like and how we choose whether we retain this kind of privileged family called the Windsors as our head of state, or whether we have a more sensible system than just crowning the heads of the same privileged family generation after generation.
You could become Republican and still stay in the UK, though, surely, couldn't you? That's not necessarily an argument for independence, is it?
If there's a no vote, then absolutely there'll still be some of us arguing for an elected head of state. But if this is a question about a referendum on independence that's happening, and I think if there's a yes vote, we immediately begin discussing what kind of country are we going to build? A democratic one, or just one that continues the same mistakes of the UK?
This goes to the heart of the SNP problem, where they want to tell you everything will change, but nothing will change. So all the things you like will still keep happening. All the bad things just won't happen anymore. And I've got to pick up Fiona's point about success and the measure of success. I don't think the measure of success for any Scot is the Tories, to be blunt. I think we should have our own measure of success, how we create opportunity, how we create employability, how we make sure every young person can maximise their full potential. And I genuinely and passionately believe we can do that as part of the United Kingdom, as long as we have a government that's focused on the right issues. And I think if we do that, we can be proud of ourselves in this debate, but more importantly, build the kind of Scotland that Patrick's talking about. I share Patrick's vision for what we can do with Scotland, perhaps not on the monarchy, but on most other things. I share Patrick's vision about creating a fairer, more prosperous beacon of hope in Scotland. I genuinely and passionately believe we can do that as part of the UK.
Fiona Hislop, why do you want to keep things like the pound, like the Queen?
Well, there's certain things that we can keep, and the social union, I think, is part of things that we would want to keep, but there are fundamental things that we would want to see transferred to an independent Scottish Government, not least in terms of the economic arguments, but also about issues around defence. I do not want this country ever again to be taken into an illegal war, which has caused so much hardship to the people of Iraq and others. And I think that's one of the strongest reasons why we'd want to have a different system. And also on welfare, fundamental issue, bedroom tax. Do we really think an independent Scotland would ever have introduced something as hated as the bedroom tax?
I do want to keep the Queen. I do want to keep the pound. I do want to keep the British Army. I do want to keep the Olympic team GB. I do want to keep the BBC. I think all of these things are good things, and I want to keep them. And I think that we should be proud of them, and we should be proud of the fact that as Scots, they're ours too. We've contributed to them. Their successes are our successes, because we've helped build this country over 300 years. And Dylan, I think they are good things, and I want to keep them, and that's why I'm voting no.
OK, someone mentioned defence, so I'm going to move on to another question from Anna McIver from Fife College. Anna.
Would independence mean that Scotland's defence needs would change?
Would Scotland's defence needs change if we were independent? Ruth Davidson.
I think it's difficult to make out what exactly the plans are that are being proposed for an independent Scotland in defence, because the white paper is different to two of the previous papers that were put out in defence before that. I spent a short period of time in the reserve forces. I come from a bit of a forces family. A number of my family were involved. I think we have the most professional armed forces in the world. I think that the work that we do around the world is to be valued. Before I became a politician, I was a journalist. I spent some time out in Kosovo during the war there, a war that Alex Salmond said was unpardonable folly. I'll tell you exactly what we did in that war. We went out there and we stopped genocide. We stopped the systematic annihilation of a people, and I'm proud of that. And I think everybody should be proud of that. I saw things there that I never want to see again. And I saw people that came from my school, Buckhaven. I can see there's people down in the front who are out there with the Black Watch, patrolling streets and keeping children safe. And I'm immensely proud of our armed forces, and I don't want to see them broken up.
Fiona Hislop, if we were independent, clearly our defence needs would be different because we would be a smaller country.
Yeah, our defence needs would be different. I think in terms of our particular needs, if you look at the North Atlantic, in terms of sea protection, currently there isn't a sea protection taking place in terms of frigates from the UK government, whereas in Scotland that would be different because our needs would be different in that respect. I think we would take on more of a peacekeeping role and responsibility, but we're in a situation currently where, and in this area in Fife, many servicemen are losing their jobs as we speak in relation to the defence changes that are taking place. Would our needs mean that we require nuclear weapons? No, we wouldn't. We would not be seeking to be an international world power that spends hundreds of billions of pounds on weapons of mass destruction. That makes sure we can use those resources in a much better way, both indeed for defence but also in other ways. So would our defence need to reflect a small independent northern state in Europe? Yes, they would. And I think it would be far more effective in terms of the independence. We'd be working with other countries as we have done in the past, but we would also make sure that we would get rid of nuclear weapons from Scotland's waters.
That ripple of applause suggests that people would quite like to be rid of something like Trident, for example.
Look, I want to rid Scotland, the UK and indeed the world of nuclear weapons. And I just think there's a contradiction in Fiona's position where she wants to join a nuclear alliance of NATO and still says we would rid Scotland of nuclear weapons. I don't think it's credible just moving the weapons 300 miles down the road just so I can sleep a little more comfortably at night time. I want to rid the world of nuclear weapons. The way you do that is working in partnership, not just with the UK, but actually with international agencies to make it happen.
But is the way that you do that commissioning new ones, which cost an awful lot of money?
Well, there's no decision being made on that, but what the point is there's a jobs issue as well, and I think that can't be ignored. But the other point about Iraq is, look, I fundamentally oppose the war in Iraq. It was an absolute mistake, a tragedy that should never, ever have happened. But Iraq was wrong. It doesn't make independence right. And if you look at a vote that took place in the Commons just last year, yes, we can talk about Scotland going into the war in Iraq, but actually the Scottish Parliament voted in favour of the war in Iraq. Let's not forget that. And the second point is the block votes that we had in Scotland helped stop a war in Syria. That shows you how it can work both ways. Scotland's strong voice as part of the UK stopped a war taking place just last year. Why would we want to lose that?
Patrick.
Anas makes the case for multilateral disarmament instead of unilateral disarmament, and I understand why some people have gone on that journey. They used to campaign with CND placards, and they now say, well, let's disarm the whole world. Let's have multilateral nuclear disarmament. The fact is that's not what's happening. What's happening at the moment is unilateral rearmament of nuclear weapons. To come back to the question from the audience, would our defence needs change? Our defence needs have already changed. It's just that the UK's defence culture and establishment hasn't caught up with it. The things which threaten, which genuinely pose threats to human well-being and human security in the 21st century are not the defence of peaceable borders between neighbouring countries in Western Europe. The things that threaten human well-being are about food and energy and climate and water and land. These are the things that we need to focus on, not the aggressive projection of military power around the world, whether with nuclear weapons or with massive aircraft carriers that we don't have the aircraft to put on. The opportunity of independence is to re-examine defence and security from first principles. What is it that we seek to defend, and how can we contribute to the security of the whole world? That's not being done at UK level.
Right, let's see what the audience thinks. Hands up if you think defence is a big issue in the referendum campaign for you. Hands up if you don't think it's a big issue. Right, so more people think it's a big issue than it isn't. Right, hands up if you think it's a big issue in the referendum. Who thinks defence is an issue in the referendum? Why? What bit of it?
I'm on the spot here.
That's the point.
Yeah. Oh God.
Is it? I mean, why? I mean, is nuclear weapons a big issue for you during the referendum?
I think the idea of moving nuclear weapons is a big issue, because the cost of moving them from Scotland down to England is massive for both Scotland and England. To be able to house them in England, to make the, a place to put them will cost so much money for the English or UK government, whilst to move them from Scotland, it will be a massive amount of money as well.
But would you want to keep them?
I'd rather keep them here.
Yeah. Who else wanted to? Who else had something on this? Right. We're going to get the microphone to you from behind, just to take you by surprise. Go on then.
I think it's the Scottish independence side of the military side. I think it's a massive part of Scottish independence that we're defending our own country. But I'd also like to ask, is there actually a thing where servicemen are from Scotland serving abroad, like my uncle, do they have the right to vote in the independent referendum?
Fiona Hislop, do servicemen from Scotland working abroad at the moment, serving abroad at the moment, they have the right to vote?
My understanding is yes they can, but I can make sure we get information.
Ruth, do you agree? Is that the case? I think it is.
As I understand it, as long as they have a registered address in Scotland, then they can, yeah.
So they will be able to vote. Do you think it's important that they have their say on particularly this one, given that clearly defence is quite a significant issue to some of you?
It's a massive thing, because if they're fighting for our country, they just have as many rights as we do to have to vote.
Absolutely. And Ash brought up the issue briefly of jobs. Now, we're not very far away from Rosyth here. What would happen, for example, to Rosyth if Scotland was independent, Patrick?
I don't know. It depends on the kind of government that was elected in 2016. If you had the SNP or a Labour or a Green government, you would get different policies. This is the thing that independence offers to Scotland, is the ability to make those choices for ourselves. So you'd have different policies on offer from different political parties in 2016 in the election.
I just think for thousands of families who rely on that income and that support, don't know is not good enough.
But defence is
the key challenge is it's absolutely clear in terms of commissioning warships and big MOD projects, those contracts stay within the United Kingdom. And the only way of guaranteeing those contracts for Govan, for Rosyth and for Scotstoun is to stay part of the United Kingdom to win those MOD contracts.
You know fine well it's within European protection, European procurement rules. This is a very serious point. In terms of military capabilities, we would want to make sure we've got capability on the west of Scotland and on the east of Scotland. And in terms of the refurbishment, in terms of the skills that are there, they're highly skilled workforce there that will be part of an independent Scotland.
But Fiona, do you accept there's an opt-out for defence infrastructure?
But
do you accept that?
In terms of being able to give contracts, we're quite clear that it's perfectly capable. And we've seen the statements also from the companies on the Clyde that they understand and appreciate that they will have contracts going forward with an independent Scotland or not with an independent Scotland. I think in terms of that capability, that's already been established in terms of the frigates that will be built.
Right, I'm not going to get into an internecine war there on the platform. I'm going to move on to, getting on for our second last question from Adam Knox from Belbaxter High School. Where's Adam? Where are you, Adam? Right down the front. You're right down the front. I've been to you already, haven't I? Right, what's your question for the panel?
Oh, back to the tuition fees. Do you think in an independent Scotland, Scottish students would have to pay tuition fees for university?
No, I brought in that bill. That bill was part of one of the first things that I did as a government minister. I know the cost of it because I introduced it. I think it's one of our strengths. And indeed, Scotland is more like the rest of Europe in terms of European countries that have free tuition for university fees, or have them at least paid by their government. Germany used to have them and now they've scrapped them. The only country that's really out of kilter, and out of kilter to a huge extent, is England with £9,000 of tuition fees there. It's extremely expensive. We're starting to see a real collapse, not only in student numbers at English universities, but also investment levels in terms of the universities. Scotland has a great strength with our university sector. It's a real, I think, a real part and parcel of our education system, that you can go to university regardless of your income levels, and that your ability to learn is more important than your ability to pay. That's what we can achieve, and we can achieve that in education. Just think of the types of policies we can achieve in other areas if we're independent.
Fiona said how we will be the best of friends with the rest of the UK, and they'll agree to let us share the pound, they'll agree there'll be no border controls, they'll agree on defence spend, but at the same time, to those same best friends, we're going to say, actually, see those students that are going to come from the rest of the UK, they'll still need to pay their tuition fees, even though those from the rest of the UK won't. We're going to discriminate if you're from Manchester and not if you're from Marseille. I think that goes against the principle of what we all believe in Scotland.
Patrick, you're shaking your head in disbelief.
I think that's a really disappointing answer. It's for the UK government to decide whether they want their students coming out of their degree courses with tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. It's for the Scottish government to decide whether that should happen to Scottish students. I think it's absurd. To suggest that young people starting out in their life, before they've got their first job, before they've maybe settled down and started a family, before they've got their first place to live, start their life with tens of thousands of pounds of debt. But Scotland should not only stick to that policy, but fund college education as well, so that all people have got the choice of the education that they need.
Anas Sarwar, are they right to have gone down the route of free tuition fees in Scotland?
Look, I support the principle of free education, absolutely. The point I'm making is it's in the white paper. The white paper is stating that there would still be tuition fees charged from people from the rest of the UK, but not from the rest of Europe.
It's in the white paper. Scotland students will have free education and free tuition in an independent Scotland. That's in the white paper.
And the rest of the UK would still pay tuition fees.
To come in on that one.
No, I do. I think Adam's point is, what's it going to be like in an independent Scotland? Well, I think, there won't be upfront tuition fees in independent Scotland if the SNP is in power, and there won't be upfront tuition fees under devolution in Scotland if any of the major parties at Holyrood are in power, because even the Conservative policy is that it's a graduate endowment, i.e. once you've got your degree, once you're earning over a certain amount, then you contribute. We think that's fair because we don't think a binman should be paying for a duke's daughter to go to university. But I think what's interesting as well is that Fiona says that her system is the best in the world and all the rest of it. Well, that's a system that's seen 180,000 fewer people studying at colleges across Scotland since they came to power. That's a system that now has fewer people from the poorest families. Fewer people from the poorest families going to university in Scotland than is the case in the rest of the UK. I think what's really important is, what is it that you want to do with the educational models that you have? I want to see more people having more opportunities going forward.
We want young Scots in jobs, and that's exactly what we've managed to do.
So why are you cutting 180,000
the college system has put Scots into jobs.
Why are you cutting 180,000
college places? It is a fair question. Why have you cut college places?
The places are for full-time students so they can get into jobs, and Scotland has, in terms of its unemployment rate, a far better situation than the rest of the UK, particularly for young people. And I think it's really important that we get young people jobs. We've come through a very difficult time of recession, and in terms of budgets, remember, one of the reasons we want independence is we can decide all of our budget. Currently we're given a block grant, which also means the reduction that we've had from the Westminster in terms of the Scottish budget has put pressure on every single sector, and that's what we want to do.
One last short question from the audience. It's from Jamie McLeod of Madras College. Where are you, Jamie? Right behind you. Perfect timing.
Should independence fail, is there any guarantee that we'll be able to rejoin the Union?
Before you answer, could you just ask that one again for us, please?
In the event that independence doesn't work out for Scotland, is there any guarantee that we'll be able to rejoin the UK?
Well, that wouldn't be what I'd be campaigning for. I want to vote yes and make a go of independence. I think the problem that I want to challenge, the reason why I'm supporting independence, is not because I'm a nationalist. I don't have any great feelings of patriotism or national identity. The reason that I want Scotland to be independent is to challenge the way the UK is running its economy, its society, its culture, politically as well. I wouldn't want to go back into that after I've just got out of it.
This is the biggest decision this country will make in 300 years, and I genuinely believe we have the safety and security of being part of the UK, but at the same time a stronger voice with a strong Scottish Parliament. But the reality is this is a big, irreversible decision, and that's why we've got to make sure we have all the facts and all the details in advance of that referendum, and not just it'll all work out in the end approach that we have from the Scottish Government. I do think it's that big a decision, and that's why I believe in the safety and security of the UK.
There's well over 100 members, independent members of the United Nations, many of whom have become independent in recent decades. And of those countries that have become independent over the years, not one of them has ever asked to go back. Once you're independent, they see the possibilities of shaping the new nation, and not one of them has ever asked to go back to the union they left.
Ruth Davidson.
I want to see a United Kingdom flourish, and I want us to be proud as Scots of what we're contributing to that and what we're contributing to the world. So I want to make sure that we have continuous membership of the United Kingdom that we've helped build and that I'm proud of, and that we've committed so much to in the last 300 years.
Well, I think that's a great point to finish on, because we've been running over the panel. All a big question. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks to our panel.